Hello, everybody. So recently I came into possession of a log of walnut. I cut the log into two even-sized pieces and then split the log down the middle to be able to turn a couple of bowls. So I turned the first bowl that you saw and set it aside to kind of dry out a little bit. I wanted it to sort of change shape and do any movement that it was going to do. So this video is all about how I took the rough piece of wood and turn the bowl. And then, of course, I'm going to finish the other bowl as well. So it's kind of nice. You can get two or more pieces out of one chunk of wood. There's other methods to get even more pieces of wood out of it, but I lack the tools necessary for that. So right now I'm just kind of stuck with hogging out as much material as I possibly can to get the bowls that I need. So getting it all set up, ready to go. I did lop off the corners to make it a little bit easier to turn. Now, one thing I do want to point out is I kind of started a little backwards. This was a mistake of mine. I'm learning a new technique right now, and this technique involves a different type of grind than I'm used to. And so this is sort of my initial sort of half-ass attempt at making a cut in the wood, not realizing, of course, that I was just starting in the wrong spot. So, we make mistakes. And I do manage to get a grip and get some wood turned off of it. But as you'll see here in a little bit, I do back up a little bit and start where I'm supposed to be starting, which is on the outer edge of the piece of wood. The idea is you want to true up the outer edge first before you go and attempt the angle that I was attempting. It makes it a little bit easier and not as bumpy, I guess you'd say. So changing angles here. I am truing up the outside. And I want to say this particular grind on the bowl gouge is pretty cool. This is called a 40-40 grind. It's something that's been popularized by some prominent wood turners. I've just kind of learned how to set the grind on my bowl gouges through watching many YouTube videos. This is my effort of learning how to use the many techniques around using this particular grind. Here you can see all those shavings. Beautiful, wonderful shavings. It's so gratifying when you have that much wood come off at one time. And I have to say, this particular grind on the bull chuck just really makes that work. It just loves chewing up the wood. And you get such a nice, smooth finish. So here I'm cleaning up the bottom, trying to get it all nice and flat so that I can get my tenon set up. Marked out the tenon. Now working through the outside edge, trying to create a base for the bowl so that the bowl chuck has something to set up against. So this technique uses a lot of push cuts around the outside towards the chuck. You can see I got that shape pretty quick. Even though I've sped up this video 8 times, by the way, that's the speed of all of these sped up shots, is only 8 times. But even though I sped it up, the interesting part about it is that the turning goes really, really fast with this particular bowl gouge grind. Switching over to the bowl chuck now. I'm getting it mounted in so I can work on the inside. This is where the 40/40 grind really shines quite a bit, is on the inside. You can hog out a ton of material. Now again, I'm just learning this technique, so this is going to take a while for me to really kind of perfect, but hopefully you'll see the value in what I'm doing here and just trying to show my experiences. One thing about walnut that's still kind of green like this stuff is it's a little on the stringy side. You'll notice that the walnut actually looks green rather than brown. And the interesting part is that whatever chemicals are present in the wood, as it oxidizes, it turns brown while it dries. So what we see in parts of this video of green wood will actually turn brown as it's drying out. So the longer it sits, the darker it becomes. And I really like this particular cut of wood because there's so many light variations throughout the wood. Walnut is known for its very consistent brown color, but I just love seeing grain. I like the variation in grain. And I think this particular piece and the other piece that I trimmed up in this video turned out really pretty. You can start to see some of the color there of the green wood underneath. Now this is sort of a, I will say sort of, a twice turn project. I am turning to a rough shape and then letting it dry. Again, more chips to show the value of this particular bowl gouge grind. Hogging away the inside. Twice turning means that you take something that's green and you trim it to a rough size, you let it dry out, do whatever movement it's going to do as it's drying, and then go back and do kind of a final trim on it. Now this is preferable if you want to end up with a nice shaped piece that has a good uniform roundness to it. If you're looking for the wood to change shape, excellent. There are many ways in which the wood will move, and the most common is it will turn into sort of an oval shape. And that can be very pretty. Just depends on the end goal and what you're looking for. Again, you'll see the green wood here as I stop once in a while. Look how green that is. Every once in a while, you'll see me stop and use my depth gauge. Again, this is just to make sure that I don't blow out the bottom. With this particular bowl, I'm leaving just enough extra to give it just a slight trimming later once it's had a chance to dry out a little bit. Now, I do dry the wood very slowly. I try to just let it sit for a while. There's different methods of drying. My current method for these is just to throw it in a pile of shavings. The shavings that came off the wood are still kind of wet, and they will allow for the air to kind of reach the wood without drying it too fast. Hopefully that makes sense. It keeps a good stable environment for the wood to dry out slowly without creating cracks or splits or checks. So this bowl comes off. This one's ready to go in the pile. I just threw it right under the lathe and all the wood chips and get it out of the way. So that will slowly dry. Green and brown currently, but it does turn brown after a while as it dries. So here's the first bowl that I did previously. It's been sitting in my basement, kind of drying for about 5-6 weeks. You can see it's a little bit out of round. But here I'm going to trim it up. Now this one did dry a little bit more after I completed it, so it has just the slightest bit of an oval shape, but I think it really lends to the overall aesthetic and quality of the piece. It looks very nice. I will say walnut is a beautiful wood once it's turned. I mean, it's beautiful to begin with, but wood turning is especially pretty for certain woods and the grains that they have. By the way, this is a 5/8 inch bowl gouge. I do switch over to the 1/2 inch bowl gouge. Truing up the outside, just getting a little bit more round, trying to tidy up that shape. Now, one of the things that I learned about this particular grind and the techniques that you use is you'll notice that my hand is not touching the tool post. In some cases, I don't want my hand to touch the tool post because that will allow for my hand to kind of control the tool's position, and in doing so, it kind of makes the tool bounce a little bit. If I allow the tool to just cut in the direction that I'm controlling it with my right hand, back on the handle, it glides through the wood with no bounce. It's really an interesting technique and one that has taken me a little bit of practice because I'm so used to having my hand on the tool rest. Using that technique, I've learned that I can control my cuts much, much better now. So again, another massive step on my journey of learning how to turn wood. I did switch to the 1/2 inch bowl gouge here, just smoothing up the inside and the bottom. Now the thing about walnut is it has a dark center and a white outside. So the white that you see on the wood is the outside newer growth of the wood, where the inside brown is the old dead growth. I mean, it's technically still alive, but it's no longer growing, so to speak. So it becomes very dense and hard, and that's what gives us the color that we love so much about walnut. So this one, I tried to leave some of the outside white present so that it had a good variation in grain. Went through and sanded, grit up to about 320 to 400. I didn't go too high with this one. I wanted this one to be a little bit more rustic, a little bit more tactile, something not super smooth. I wanted it to have some feel to it when you pick it up and use it. And I'm cleaning it with alcohol because alcohol doesn't raise the grain nearly as much as water. This is just to kind of get rid of any excess dust that might be present on the wood. Here I'm using walnut oil. There is a link down in the description for the oil that I use. I love this stuff. Now, naturally, I'm using walnut oil on walnut wood, but walnut oil is a very, very beautiful oil once you apply it to some wood, it can bring out a lot of color and texture in the grain. So I felt it was kind of fitting to just use the same oil that comes from the tree onto the wood itself, just to rejuvenate it and give it some luster and life. Now, a piece like this is going to require a lot of oiling over time, so I will probably be hitting it with oil probably about every couple weeks, just to keep it wet until it finally becomes saturated and stable. Now, as somebody pointed out previously, walnut oil can be an allergen to some, especially those that have nut allergies. So I don't use it on everything that I turn. Especially knowing that now, I will definitely make a note to anybody who might be interested in one of these pieces that I have that does have walnut oil on it. So thank you for that comment if you happen to see this video. Thank you. So now I've turned it around and I've put it on what's called a jam chuck. And I did make the jam chuck off camera, but the idea is that the jam chuck gives the bowl something to rest up against. So we put a little bit of back pressure onto the bowl using the tailstock, and it jams it into the chuck just enough so that you can turn different parts of the piece. In this case, I'm just getting rid of the tenon, smoothing out the bottom, cleaning up the bottom edge curves so that it looks a little bit cleaner, that sort of thing. So this is the finishing touches. Smooth up that bottom edge. Now the thing about this is, even though I've sped it up, I'm actually turning at kind of a slow pace, a slow RPM, and I am taking very gentle cuts across the surface of the wood. This is so that I don't create any catches and drag the bowl off of the jam chuck. Even though it's jammed on there pretty decently and it's not likely to move, especially if I have a really good sharp tool. But there is always that risk, and want to take it easy. I like to give all of my pieces a little foot. So that's that little drop in that you see there. And then a light sanding, get it sanded back up to the level of the rest of the bowl itself. Now you notice I've got one little spot that is being held on by the tailstock there. I will take that off here in just a minute. So we'll remove the bowl. Now I use a pull saw, a flexible pull saw. This is one that's designed for surface cutting. You see it does a really nice job of cutting the surface without gouging any of the rest of the wood. Sand off the rough bits, get it nice and flat. Again, going through the grits. And then the branding. All branded up, just a final sanding just to get rid of some of the smoke burn marks. And I'll finish it up with some more walnut oil. I used a lot of walnut oil on this. It just soaked it right up. It just loves the oil. You definitely want to be liberal with the oil as much as possible. And there it is in slightly different light, so the oil is soaked in a little bit. And a final side-by-side comparison of the first one and the second one. And I'll finish the second one in some weeks to come. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.